Don't have a Hilternship?
Not working 80 hours a week and feeling guilty?
Feeling like the world's going to end because of a few bad grades?
Don't have your entire life figured out?
Neither do we, and we're seniors. Hi, I'm Jenny.
And I'm Dhanya. In this podcast series, we'll be talking about all these questions we asked and more to understand why AU is the way that it is, and if there's anything that we, as in you and us, can do about it.
This podcast is a 3-part series released by AU's Center for Diversity and Inclusion, or CDI. Today, we'll be sitting down with Kiran Waqar and Nia Mays, 2 undergraduate students at AU, to talk about grind culture and burnout.
So we encourage you to put away whatever you're working on, relax, even take a walk as you tune in.
So my name is Kiran Waqar. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior studying sociology with a minor in transcultural studies. I go to American University. So on campus, I'm involved with a couple clubs. I'm involved with Muslim Student Association largely. I'm involved with Asian American Student Union Advocacy Committee. I do intergroup dialogue with Dhanya. I help co-lead an alternative break to South Africa, which is focused on like transnational movements, and went previously myself. And I'm a Frederick Douglass Distinguished Scholar on campus. And then off campus, I'm involved with my local school district back in Vermont. I do some stuff there around like community building and especially in for race-based affinity spaces for middle schoolers and high schoolers there. And then I also work for Heart Women and Girls, which is a nonprofit that works on sexual violence in Muslim communities.
My name is Danielle J. Mays. I'm a second semester junior here at AU, and I would say my most important affiliations here at AU are number one, I'm a Center for Diversity and Inclusion intergroup dialogue facilitator. So I facilitate important conversations about race, gender, sexuality, the whole gamut. And then I've also created a organization called Blacklist, which uplifts Black students and basically anybody who wants to come to really learn about our collective Black art history. And like we do talkbacks and interviews and just spaces and create spaces for Black joy. And I've been doing that. We launched in August, so it's just been a wild ride on that. And yeah, I think those are my important affiliations.
So we just wanted to ask if you can explain a little bit of AU's culture in your own words, not just about grind culture, but just generally how you feel like AU's culture is like.
I think AU is a place you come if, I think the way AU markets itself is very much like change makers, come change the world type energy, which can bring students who are really, really passionate, really want to make a difference, and that you have that energy. I think everyone here is really passionate, but I think sometimes it can also bring students who think that they can change the world single-handedly, and they think if they work hard enough, they can change the world. And so I think AU has a lot of passion, a lot of drive, a lot of really hardworking students, but I think sometimes it misses some of that like aspect of community and introspection and like starting with where you're at and getting the problem right. And so I think AU has a lot of passion and hard work, but sometimes it's just missing the analytical or like the focus that it needs. And I think that is because of things like grind culture, where we spend all our time working and not thinking about why we're working, you know?
Absolutely. I just want to thank you for bringing a very authentic answer. I think that just allows us to dive deeper into this.
If you can tell us a little bit about AU's culture in your own words, how you would describe it.
Of course. I think the answer to this question has changed as I've gone through the AU sphere, right? Freshman year, I would say the culture was one constant I see is like very go-getter, like gotta do this, hardworking, keep pushing through it. And basically, it's just this whole bubble of pressure that you need to have like 3 internships by your second semester freshman year. And if you don't, then you're in trouble. You need to have like a few jobs. You need to be maxing out on your credits at all times. Um, and you need to attend at least I would say 3 protests a week. Just for the fun of it, of course. Uh, yeah. Freshman year, that was like, whoa! I stepped onto the scene. I was like, this is crazy. Because I felt like everybody was so much smarter than me, right? And like, I'm not gonna say I got an ego problem, but like Nia's pretty smart, and it's just this ineptitude feeling of ineptitude. I was like, where is this coming from? Sophomore year, pretty much similar vibe, definitely similar vibe. I think that's when a lot of my friends started experiencing burnout, because freshman year, I guess it's a little more fun and adjusting, but like burnout definitely was on the horizon for sophomore year. And then I even burned out myself, but sitting in office hours crying with some teachers, I think they helped me recognize what's the pressure, why are you doing all of this stuff. But um, it was like this reality check for me second semester or first semester sophomore year. And then I've just adjusted since then. Of course, the pandemic hit, so I kind of focused on myself more, focused on my organization, things like that. And right now, I think I've come to a healthy balance, but I can still see some of my students struggling. I'm a teaching assistant. I can see some of my friends struggling. It's still all this pressure, even within the pandemic.
But going back to what you had talked about earlier about, the different ways you're kind of involved on campus, what do you think when you're offered sort of like a new opportunity or to get involved in something, have you found that it's usually based off your personal interest, or do you feel like you're influenced by other reasons to take on new projects?
That's a really good question because it's really hard. Definitely my freshman year, feeling so much like imposter syndrome and like failure constantly. Like I felt like I wasn't doing enough, and I also felt like I never got to rest. So I looked back and I was like, why was I so worried? It was a 2-page paper. Well, why did I think the world was gonna end? And why did I think I had to wake up at 5 a.m.? And why did I think all these things? So like freshman year, without a doubt, I was just trying to do something so I could say I was doing something and I would have something to talk about. And I think that's also part of AU culture because like I remember like freshman year in the lounges, you'd walk in, you'd be like, "Hi, how are you all?" And everybody like, "I interned here, I study abroad here," and I'm sure I definitely played into that too. Like, I'm not like trying to put myself above AU because I'm like I do too much too. Like, I don't rest enough as well, and so like I'm part of that grind culture even as I critique it. And so like freshman year, definitely like out of a place of insecurity, and I think it actually took some time, like in the summer, and especially over like as we've been in the pandemic, to like take some time to reflect and think. I'm like, I'm not changing anything by just saying yes to everything and like thinking that I can do it all, because if I'm so busy that I can't think, then I'm gonna get the problem wrong. I'm gonna cause harm. I'm gonna not take that time to self-reflect, and I'm gonna continue it because I can talk all day long about how we interact with knowledge weirdly at AU. But if I don't take time to like actually sit with an essay question, or if I don't take time to sit with like a discussion post or whatever else and approach those things with intentionality, I'm gonna continue it, you know? And so I'm trying to slow down. It's hard because I still feel the pressure to say yes to everything. I feel the pressure to like not let others down. I do feel like a lot of guilt sometimes saying no, but I am trying to sit with the fact that sometimes saying no and not taking opportunity is just opening doors for better opportunities, but also letting me spend more time in what I'm already doing, you know, because I don't want to half-ass things.
The way you spoke about rest and intentional rest and how critical that is to just our well-being and who we are as people, I cannot emphasize that enough. And just the
Yeah.
pressure that you are talking about, I think so many students of color at AU and at colleges at large are feeling this too. And, you being authentic and naming your own experience, that's just so powerful.
It's hard, especially it has like I don't know how you all feel, but like I feel like rest is starting to get commodified as well and like appropriated as well. And like this like political act of like intentional resistance and rest is becoming this thing that people use to like justify everything else. And it gets kind of also commodified in this language of like progressive politics or whatever else, and it gets lost from the restfulness itself, you know. And so it can be. I don't know if this is an AU thing or a national thing or where it is, but it's hard. It's hard. because like even in our moments of rest, we're supposed to be exercising or reading or writing or doing something, you know?
I wanted to ask, when you're trying to find these like new opportunities, find new ways of being challenged, or trying to find, new community, do you feel like what exactly do you feel like is influencing that? Do you feel like you are getting those some like more outside influence, or do you think it's become more like you're putting your personal interests first?
So the question is, how do I find a solution to the feeling of ineptitude?
Yeah, or like just if you feel like you're being sort of more influenced by
Like the
that.
cause of that feeling.
Yeah.
Okay, the cause of that feeling. Um, I would say I think everything was working at the same time. And by that, I mean, yes, it was an internal struggle. It was also an external struggle as well. Um, the internal struggle, I know I touched based on, like, it was just not really understanding how to function or listen to myself, like how I needed to function, um, to figure out what worked best for me. I was using models that were working best for other people, but not really consulting with myself. So that was number one. That's the internal struggle. Externally, this is a predominantly white institution, right? So I did not understand the levels, the systems of oppression at play, especially as a freshman. I'm glad that I have learned some of them now. I'm still learning, of course, but originally, I didn't, I knew something was off, but I couldn't express it. Like how I mentioned, I was learning about a lot of white writers, a lot of like how to do this, the model that worked for white people. And just in my black body, my black queer body, like what works for them will not work for me. And that's just been proven. Like it's literally been proven that we have to go through different steps. And uh, I I'm still a theater major. I'm a theater, arts and a business administration double major, right? And all of these classes, I was learning how to move my body the way that white people have moved their bodies. And it plays on your mind. This is what we call institutional systemic racism, right? It plays on your mind when you're only learning about how white people have succeeded, white people have achieved, and they're like, this is the model. We're giving you the cheat codes. Just do it. And I'm just like, okay, I can do it, but like I'm hitting block after block after block because the way my white counterparts can express themselves is not all the way that I can express myself. It's not the way that my culture has expressed themselves.
And kind of pivoting back to what you were talking about with all of these different things that you were doing, only if you feel comfortable, would you share a moment when you felt like you hit your breaking point, a moment where you had to sit with yourself and acknowledge that you felt burnt out?
Yeah. So many moments. But I think like freshman year especially, I was, and it wasn't even because I was doing the most. It was just because everything I was doing was so high stakes in my head. And I felt so bad about myself. Like I felt so like I felt like I was failing all the time, and I was comparing myself to others. And I remember like I had an essay and I just didn't know how to start it, and I felt awful. I was like, why can't I write this essay? I don't know how to do this essay. And I just thought there had to be one right answer, and that was part of it. And like if we think about the characteristics of white supremacy, one of the characteristics of white supremacy is that there is one right answer. And this essay was literally just asking me to come up with my own ideas, come up with my own thoughts, and I got like a B plus or something on the first one, and this is my second shot, and I was really scared I was gonna get like an A minus, and then I'll lose my scholarship, and then that would never make it an AU, and that was my first semester, and I was like, oh my god, if I can't get an A in this one class, then that means I shouldn't be here, and I shouldn't have come, and all those things. And so like I had this breaking point where I was like, and I just like had to stop, and I was like, you can't do this essay because you're not thinking about the essay, you're thinking about everything else besides this essay. What do you actually want to get out of this essay? Like this essay you're going to school for you. So what are you going to get out of it? And I had to slow down and like take some time to like outline and think and like also think about like justice and like essays and like thinking about like how to bring intentionality into everything I was doing. So I was like, okay, this essay is something I can learn from. I'm gonna learn some like critical thinking skills. I'm gonna learn some reflection skills, but also what am I actually curious about? And so in the essay, I ended up writing about DC gentrification and our roles in it as AU students. And that felt so much better to me because I was thinking about where my positionality was. I was thinking about these larger structures. I was learning. I was slowing down. I really had to think about like what do I want out of this education, and it's not just to get the A because if I'm getting the A without thinking, then then it's not even for me. Like who is that for?
Yeah, I really do relate to like that experience of like having grades like dictate your life because that was me in high school. And I feel like, in all my years, it's something that it's been very hard to sort of unlearn. And it just makes me sort of think about like how students of color that like, there's the idea of like feeling like an imposter. Like I just feel like, oh, I don't belong here, and now I'm gonna fail, and like everyone's gonna know that. So I think it's really hard to acknowledge that. So our next question is: do you feel like this experience, I think largely just about grind culture and what comes with it, do you think that that's something really unique to being at a school in DC?
I think it's universal because of capitalism and the ways we're socialized, but I would say it's almost I don't want to say the most harmful because I don't think that's true, but I think it's increasing like it's really really harmful at AU and schools in DC because of their this focus on like public service and like doing good and everything like that because I think it's really really easy and I've probably done this myself so many times to think because we're studying race and capital and genocide and migration and whatever else that we're like inherently good and that we're good people who can cause no harm and we don't acknowledge the ways in which like we are causing harm all the time and so like we can go to our classes and we can be like capitalism sucks but we're still all engaging in grind culture and normalizing it. But because we say capitalism sucks, we don't think about how we're also playing a role in capitalism or whatever else, and we think we can divest from it just by keeping it. And it's so dangerous because then, like, at schools like in like AU and DC, people go work for the government, NGOs, take these positions of power, whatever else, and then continue them in like these higher levels of authority, but also like in our everyday lives. Um, and like I think too in DC there's such a like a scarcity mindset where like we're all gonna fail. And like I think that's prevalent at AU to this idea of like scarcity and that there's only a limited number of options for internships and everyone you can kind of start out with like a deficit or whatever else. And so like I think everyone's always like grinding to get to the best position or get to the best internship. So don't take time to think about like do I want to work in this place? Will this place cause more harm? Will this hurt me? Will this hurt this organization? Does this organization we're not values aligned. We don't think about our values and how they're aligned. And so because we're so busy just trying to reach a goal that we don't even know if we like or not, we don't get to think about those things. And so I think it's really dangerous at AU. I think it's really prevalent and really scary.
So I think there's a lot to be said about, how important it is that we talk about these things. So as like a follow-up question, I just wanted to ask, like, do you feel like burnout gets talked about enough at AU? And like why you think it's important that we talk about it?
Mm, I think everybody thinks it's okay to talk about burnout as long as it's not yourself, right? There's this whole thing like, let's be sympathetic. And of course, it's okay to talk about like how you're struggling, but I'm not struggling. I'm totally fine. Like, but if you need me, call me, right? Um, it's like nobody wants, and I think that's to your point, Jenny, of this greater idea of mental health. And like, yes, we've made strides, great strides in the last few years about talking about mental health. Um, but we're not there yet. We're definitely not there yet because nobody wants to be sick. Nobody wants to have a cold, right? And mental health is one of those things. If you don't talk about it, it's not there, but it's still there, right? If you're sneezing and everything, of course you have a cold, but it's so easy to ignore. It's so easy to ignore. Um, but the pressure builds and builds when you ignore it, right? So it's still a problem. It's talked about, but the talking about it is not enough. We have to be able to claim it, and I believe everybody goes through burnout, right? So we have to have the ability to acknowledge it within ourselves.
That moment when you were like, everyone wants to talk about burnout, but not about them, I was like, that's the one. That is the one. And, I hope with this podcast, we're moving away from that and centering the experiences of students and, even of Jenny and I as we navigate what it means to be a student at AU as we're getting ready to leave AU. And so Nia, before we let you go and thank you for all the things that you've done, I just wanted to ask if you had any last thoughts that you wanted to share or further elaborate on that you feel is important to this discussion, or if you had any advice that you wanted to share with our listeners.
Yeah, that's a big one. I would say, I know, and this advice is hard to take, and I'm still working on it myself, but comparing your journey to somebody else's journey is no help at all, right? You really have to be able to listen to your body and your mind and figure out what works for you, and you'll get there. Wherever you want to go, you'll get there, but you have to listen to you, because following somebody else's blueprints will not get you anywhere.
And there you have it, part of the student perspective on AU's grind culture and burnout.
We want to thank Kiran and Nia for sharing their experiences, and we hope you've either learned something or recognized that it's not just you going through it.
Next time, we'll be diving into the faculty perspective and cover topics like imposter syndrome. This is Jenny.
And this is Dhanya, signing off from CDI Peer Educator Radio for today.